Welcome everybody to this webinar. Remember December 1996, how Taiji-men's persecution started denied. This online session is having the agenda on what is happening to Taiji-men spiritual community in Taiwan. My name is Camelia Marin and I am Deputy Director of Soteria International, a human rights NGO based in Denmark. I will just make a little introduction for the subject that we are presenting today, and afterwards I invite the guests to present their perspective on the case. There are several cases of spiritual communities and spiritual leaders who were medievalized and convicted by mass media far before any juridical sentence. No matter the final juridical decision, people still carry the blame for the years of trial are already a big problem to carry further. This kind of criminal charges, which actually hide certain states' tendency to restrict the rights to the freedom of consciousness, constitute an extremely serious and dangerous fact. The spiritual communities often need huge efforts and lots of courage to dare to stand for the truth and to find ways to prove the things as they happened in their cases, and thus unveiling the flaws and errors in the system. Taiji-men is such a spiritual community who faces injustices and biased application of laws and courts' decisions. All these cases are preceded and accompanied by aggressive media and public opinion campaigns, denigrating the defendants and stigmatizing the groups they belong to. A short analysis of Taiji-men case proves further the perspective given above. During the 4 months of investigation, which was in Taiji-men case, there were over 400 sensational newspaper articles and over 70 stories by more than 12 TV stations reporting on the case using information from prosecutors. This not only led to a one-sided account of the story, but also ostracized Taiji-men disciples from their communities and, in some cases, even broke up families. The highest courts and authorities of Taiwan had concluded that there was no cult, no fraud, no violation of the Tax Collection Act. On September 25, 2003, Mr. Hong, the leader of Taiji-men community, and his co-defendants were acquitted of all charges by the Taipei District Court. On December 13, 2005, the High Court of Taipei confirmed on appeal the first-degree verdict favorable to Taiji-men. On July 13, 2007, the Criminal Division of the Supreme Court of Taiwan pronounced the final acquittal of Taiji-men defendants, declaring them innocent of all charges. Even more than this, national compensations for the wrongful detention was given to Mr. Hong and his co-defendants. Still, the case continues because the National Tax Bureau claimed that the content of the red envelopes, which actually will be very much in details explained by Mr. Introvigne today, should not be considered as a gift, but as a tuition fee for receiving training in a so-called cram school, meaning a school where students engage in intensive study of a subject for a short period of time. This was denied because the Ministry of Education of Taiwan, which has direct regulatory authority over cram schools, declared 3 times from 1997 through 2000 that Taiji-men is not a cram school. The case continues between courts and administration offices till now, and even, let's say, the cherry of the authorities not respecting their own decision is that in August 2020, properties belonging to Mr. Hong were seized, then confiscated, despite massive peaceful street protests in Taiwan and appeals by international NGOs in July and August 2020. In order to understand better the case, we will invite the first speaker, Mr. Pier Marco Ferraresi, to explain us about the tax injustice. Pier Marco Ferraresi is a professional economist. He holds a doctorate in economics at University of Turin and has worked on a number of ex-ante, midterm, and export evaluations of policies in different fields, including social security, the economic impact of infrastructures, and the design of innovation policies. He is presently contract professor of microeconomics and of macroeconomic scenario at the University of Turin, where for more than a decade he held courses of public economics and of industrial organization. Pier Marco developed different domains between, actually I will just mention that two different research projects for the European Commission, a model simulating the effects of aging on the aggregate savings, as well as a model forecasting the social security expenditure in different countries. He also worked as an independent evaluator with the World Bank in order to assess the bank's assistance to pension reforms in Albania, Latvia, Macedonia, and Russia. Mr. Pier Marco Ferraresi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I am really honored for having been called to virtually meet you today. As you heard, I am a professional economist, and my research field is mainly public economics. And that is the reason because the case of太极门raised my attention and left me somehow astonished. From the point of view of an economist, as I am, we are here to remember a sad page of a country's history. A page where a taxation bureau made itself the instrument of a political and religious persecution. I have no element to say that the taxation system in Taiwan is persecutory or unjust per se. It is likely worse with respect to some systems and may be better than others, but the way the rule of law was broken in the case of太极门is bad news for the economy as a whole, since any economy always requires a certain degree of consistency in the application of the tax rules and of courts' decisions. My opinion in general is that unfortunately, nearly all tax systems, whenever used as a persecutory tools against a specific target, are particularly effective. That is due to many reasons, some of which I will try to explain in what follows. We must recognize that tax policy is a very delicate subject. Within the tax system may lurk the most insidious threats to individuals' liberty. That is due mainly to three reasons. First, tax levy directly turns the revenue of individuals' work from the legitimate purposes of the taxpayer to the ones of the administrative authorities, which are not always necessarily the same. Second, whenever government intervention within an economy expands, so does the tax burden. That frequently happens slowly and undetected, to the point where even a small change of tax policy greatly affects economic and family decisions. And you realize you have been traveling unawares, a road to serfdom. Third, tax persecutions, or even simply the taxation bureau's mistakes, are difficult to be corrected. Since once initiated, they have a sort of administrative inertia. There are many reasons for that. And one of them is that this kind of administration usually acts on a year-by-year logic and is blind to the lack of consistency of its actions across the years. The Taijimen's case is a clear example. However, the administrative inertia still left alive the claims by the Taxation Bureau for year 1992 concerning exactly the same violation which was declared inexistent by the court. On that basis, the land of the movement was seized and confiscated. And that was a clear disruption of the rule of law. Moreover, tax persecutions frequently involve elements that are too complicated to be quickly explained and easily understood by the general public. And that makes difficult the action of human rights organizations. We also must point out as a relevant element in our case that the fight against tax avoidance, which is certainly a required activity of any government, constitutes for individual freedom a much more slippery ground with respect to the fight of tax evasion. Tax avoidance is not a black and white matter. It is made of shades of gray, and the risk is that any legitimate choice on one's activity that includes an economic dimension, such as donations to a spiritual movement, may be judged unlawful by the government interpretation. That is particularly dangerous as far as the government is not required to provide strong evidence of any violation, and the burden of proof is left on the shoulders of the individual. Bad news for tax justice is that the National Taxation Bureau revealed itself, in the case of Taijimen, as an instrument of the executive power to carry out the persecution against the legitimate spiritual movement. We must point out that such a persecution was also put in place with other, even more invasive instruments, such as preventive arrests and the preventive freezing of the movement and its leaders' assets. But as we have recalled, the tax persecution was lengthier and more difficult to be stopped. I think the movement must be supported and its leaders and members must be recognized and prized for having been strong, not wanting to settle even on the last unjust tax claim for 1992. Since to admit a violation would have meant to declare that something was made contrary to the founding principles of the movement itself, and ultimately that would have given the victory to the persecutors. It looks very difficult for institutional reasons to obtain a declaration by an international human rights court that may legally recognize the persecution, even if it might fail to reverse the action of the Taxation Bureau. I am not an international lawyer, So I can't give any advice, but I sincerely admire the perseverance in continuing that battle on political and information grounds. And one of the milestones might be this meeting today. And I hope you will be strong even in the future and continue that battle. Thank you.
And further on, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your expertise. And further on, we will just go to watch a video. Yesterday, it was, we cannot really name it anniversary, but it was connected with the fact that there were passing so many years since the case started. And we'll watch a video where actually the protest, which was done, the march for the future end of this case in Taiwan. Let's see the video together.
A large yellow rubber duck, an iconic symbol of protest around the world, shows up in a march in Taiwan to protest against state violence and fight for human rights. On December 19th, over 10,000 people coming from different parts of Taiwan gather in front of the presidential office to urge the government to revoke taxation and execution bonuses, end injustice, and protect human rights.
我们的政府机关里头有政府犯罪，有一小撮的人吃的回嘟嘟，拿奖金，然后把白的说成黑的，然后自己在享受利益。这些人破坏着台湾，破坏大家的民主，破坏大家的自由。真民主、真人权是任何公民的权益。台湾是一个民主国家，台湾不是一个被少数人欺负的国家。大家应该勇敢站起来，争我们自己的自由，争自己的民主，争破除假案的平反，反暴力，反贪污，反这些肮脏的假彰钱。
The demonstrators in different costumes highlight the current situation of tax and judiciary abuse in many aspects.
可以看到，我现在身上的就是一个提款机。我们的服装的发想是因为说，我们的需要程序正义，我们是纳税人，我们合法纳税、依法纳税，我们拒绝多少缴一点，该缴的我们1分少。那就是如果政府要用非法的手段来抢我们的钱的话，我们拒绝当提款机。
According to the statistics of the Ministry of Justice, this year until August, there are over 17 million compulsory execution cases, while there are only 23 million people in Taiwan. This unusually high number is questionable with the legitimacy of execution and the cause behind these results.
在105年的时候，我就收到国税局的通知，说要我缴奢侈税。那么当时我不清楚为什么要缴奢侈税，因为这房子我就明明就自住啊，他用了各种法条解释，你就是要缴这个奢侈税500多万，如果不缴的话，再加计罚金，总共将近1000万。所以当时，我的先生可能在那个样的一个压力之下，所以跟我提离婚。几乎在当时的状况之下，我觉得我都快要崩溃了，因为我遇到这样子的事情，我根本是求助无门。
Among the tax victim cases, the most long-standing Taiji-man case has lasted for 24 years. While the Supreme Court has ruled Taiji-man not guilty and no tax evasion in 2007, their properties were still illegally auctioned in August.
这个中间，国产和民产中间的界限就是依法申报纳税，依法申报课税。所以你在依法课税条件下，把免税所得来课税，那就是抢夺人民财产嘛，这绝对是政府的暴力，政府的错误。
The protesters also condemned police brutality of the September 19 incident. A 60-year-old volunteer of the Tax and Legal Reform League, Mrs. Huang, was arrested during her peaceful appeal on the side of a road. The protesters urged Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen to safeguard people's freedom of speech. The 8-hour-long event is also broadcasted on the internet with people from over 20 countries watching together. They encourage everyone to be part of the change and demand tax and legal reform in Taiwan. GPDN, Taipei.
As we could see, the case is still continuing, and this video, March for the Future and State Violence, it's a hope from the Taijimen, DZ Taijimen people to see how actually all this long story with courts, between courts and administration will end. And further on, we will see together another video, Remember December 1996.
我那时候我刚好在大安3楼嘛，电话进来，啪的，那时候树林，我记得树林广打电话说有调查局的人来了。
何宽仁带了一群人，就2点45分就冲上去。那我们也不知道那些人是谁，一群一进来就20-30个，都是壮汉的冲进来，
在门口看到有警察，然后荷枪实弹。
这个警察都，还有那个调查局的人都带枪啊，带手枪啊，那当时真的很恐怖。
因为我工厂离这边也差不多5分钟，我就过来一看，哇，那是什么这么不讲理，翻箱倒柜的啊，
拖了柄啦吼，而且柜子还锁着，锁着因为咱无锁匙啊，伊讲你得爱开起来，无开开呢，我还弄个破。
他就很凶，就说你那个师兄。钥匙再不拿来的时候，我要把它踹开。你有雄心，我一卡就应该踏落去啊！
我背的包包就刚放在会馆而已，然后他就说这个包包要收藏。
那当我到会馆的时候，看到很多记者，我当下非常的生气了哈，也非常惊讶，就说：哎，奇怪，记者怎么会知道？因为理论上像这种是一个调查的过程啊，怎么会有记者过来？
那出去的时候呢，我们一定不能让师父走在前面嘛，所以那时候我们出去的时候，我们就先往前走，然后门一开起来，一出去的时候，就很多的那个灯光啊，媒体就一直照相，一直照相，一直照相。
结果我正好要走出那个便利商店门口的时候，我就看到师父跟着一大群我不太认识的人，就匆匆忙就在我眼前这样走过去。那其实我就走到门口，我就是望着师父的背影，就看着师父就这样，好像就在我前面消失这样子。
当时看到外面真的很乱了，有警车，有 SNG 车，又封锁，我们不能进去啊，就在门口那边看到少数的师兄姐在那里。听说师父已经跟一些师兄姐已经被带到调查局。
我们就来的时候已经，就说那时候已经都被押到里面去了，好几个师兄师姐都去。但是那时候一方面我们是在，我们想说又没有什么事情，怎么可能说会？那结果我们一方面是在筹钱啦，就是因为如果说要交保的话，我们身上都没，那就是就是师兄师姐大家都帮忙，可以领的，可以什么的，就是有的，我们就是尽量就是凑就对了。我记得好像那我们就在那边等啊，结果说什么收押，后来他就说什么，就是我记得还在说什么收押禁见。
我太太就第一天她这边值班的时候，她就已经被带进去了，就带到那个调查局去，所以说她那天被问了蛮晚的回来。
我又没有犯罪，你干嘛要带我去调查站？他说你念比较久啊， 那你不去，那我等一下楼下就多带几个师兄姐去这样子。
我妈当下跟我讲的电话，让我这辈子都忘不了。她就说她不知道她能够几点回到家，甚至她也不晓得是不是当天有可能回到家。她就交代我说回家要准备晚餐啊，然后要把家里打理好啊。然后那当下感觉就觉得天哪，是怎么了？为什么？就是你不知道到底外界发生什么事情，然后更可怕是你不知道自己的妈妈会不会回来，然后那种心情是非常的紧张。后来我妈虽然就是有从调查局回来，可是我听她在转述在调查局的一个状况啊，她竟然是在那边连上厕所，然后那边的调查局的人不让她锁门，就是完全没有人权的对待，就是把我们一个清清白白练功的这样的一个修行人，然后当作是罪犯在审问这样子。
迄天就寒，迄天甲想遐有寒，迄天唔知啥特别寒，了后才叫你转去。我伫迄共款的台北市调处，我拄仔行路要过，看到师傅，师傅回头看我一下，我看，四眼交汇，我把眼流出来。人家讲一个这么好的人，迄类，所以我的眼泪流下。迄天我的心疼，我们知师傅，等于从那一天开始，我们就看不到师傅了，等于我第一样代志，迄阵在12点外，阮的囡仔拢伫阮太太伫，阮太太就这样赶快把小孩叫来，
爸爸妈妈就把我们家3个叫到他们房间，然后就把他们的存款簿一些资料拿出来，然后就跟我们讲说，我们日常开销要从哪边付钱，然后就说他们2个已经请好律师了，就叫我们不要担心。然后当下你其实并不会觉得当下，我觉得当下我其实那个感觉，我只有想到说，对啊，我们这个年纪其实我们已经当时已经高中了，就是真的，假如爸爸妈妈不在的话，我们3个小孩子，我们还是有办法，我们可以靠打工。就是你其实生活是有办法过下去的，可是我所认识的师兄师姐，他们年纪还这么小，假如真的是他们父母被抓走的话，他们该怎么办？
我们不晓得公权力会搞到什么程度，我们只知道他就这样每天给你报道，师兄师姐就这样，一下你就听到这个师兄师姐被他们的人约谈，一下就有那个人说他也被约谈。
在12月24号当天早上7点多，我们那时候不知道是说可以拒绝，但是有问他说我一定要跟你走吗？他说你不走可以啊，我就把你们更多的师兄师姐全部都抓起来啊。就是这样子的话，让你觉得说与其这样，那不如我去吧。
发生事情以后，正文师兄就没有在学校出现嘛，所以老师也会，他不敢问我，但是他会问孩子说：“你爸爸发生什么事？那他怎么会在电视上出现？”那我觉得孩子很单纯，他就会跟老师说：“因为爸爸要去救师父。”
那个时候心情是不会形容，就是应该是蛮酸的。那因为师父师母都不在家，那我们就要很勇敢，然后天天都会到会馆。那当然那时候我们都不敢穿连功服，我们都是衣服带的，然后穿的便服。
侯宽仁姐她都每天都会在媒体上发布消息，有没有那种不实的消息这样？然后你就发现说好可怕，你就觉得说，现在那时候连住的地方那个室内电话你都不敢用，你都会觉得说是不是被窃听了，然后你都不敢用家里的电话，然后公司电话你也不太敢讲，然后你就害怕说其他师兄姐会不会被连累，所以你知道那时候所有的通讯录全部被我毁掉，你就觉得说为了不要让任何一个师兄师姐再受到伤害。
那所以我交代他们清楚说爸爸把我的那个像妈妈的退休金 还有我爸爸的一些我们的存款多少，都交代小孩子，说万一我们进去的话，你要去找阿姨或找他怎么招呼你，因为那时候总觉得说我们已经被那个谁。侯宽仁罗致的说，师兄师姐每个几乎是说，我们出来做义工的都是共犯那种感觉呢。
其实我们家里我也准备一个包包，随时准备哈，万一如果怎么样子哈，早晚的话，万一不巧被莫名其妙就扣进去的话哈，那至少来讲不会措手不及的。
那正文师兄他家里被搜索，他被带走的时候，他后来有打电话告诉我们。他们来过了，他用简单的一句话，我们就听懂了。然后那时我们也开始做好心理准备，可能也会到我们家搜索，少周师兄也可能会被带走。那我觉得我必须要让我的孩子先做好心理准备。我就告诉2个小孩，其实那时候老大是11岁，老二是7岁。我告诉他们说，爸爸有可能会被带走离开这个家，那不过没关系，还有妈妈在照顾你们。
我那时候很怕，我放学半路就被抓走。对，我非常那时候想说会不会半路就被抓走，然后他就跟我爸说：“你女儿现在在我们手上，你如果不老实回答，你就完蛋了。”就是那种感觉。就因为他们就没有理由就把我爸带走了，我爸什么事都没做。那我就想他们会不会就是要找个人，就像电视里面演的，就把你女儿带来。他就说，如果你还想要你女儿幸福的话，你就好好给我回答，就要回答他要的答案这样。
那时候进见的话，就是说，在那个我看不到三个榻榻米的地方，就在那边你不动，不能动，也不能出去，也不能联络，不能对外沟通，不能看报纸、看电视，然后根本也不能晒太阳，太阳根本没有让你的地方晒。所以就是在那边一直待，每天就这样吃饱就睡，睡饱吃了，然后白天又不能睡觉，睡觉就找你，就把你叫起来，他不准睡觉，所以过的就是好像不是人的生活了。
结果后来就是一直就是吃了一个便当之后就一直问，到傍晚的时分，他说那你可以回去了。那个调查员跟我讲说。太极门如果真的如你讲的这么好，你要坚持下去，风暴会过去。调查员最后再跟我讲，我说谢谢。我走出那天是耶诞12月24号，真的走出调查局门口的时候，真的是一片茫然。耶诞节，那我家人不知道我去哪里，我不知道我会不会回来。那时候什么都没带，就只好找个公共电话亭，告诉他们我出来了。那就是我的耶诞节。然后那天一样到晚上到会馆去，我们还是过了一个含着眼泪带着微笑，但是真的大家的笑声背后都在哭，只是告诉大家说大家耶诞节嘛，但是那个耶诞节真的是黑色的耶诞节。我们一定要维持这个家，让它灯火通明，谁都不能把我们家的灯熄掉。
Thank you very much for the video. It is impressive to see how after so many years, 24 years, the story didn't end. And for several of those involved, probably let's say, the blame and the situation that they are facing for 24 years was even creating wounds in their souls, or if, I don't know, if they were just continuing practicing and going further for the spirituality, probably they solved inside the issue. But for in general, 24 years of such a case, it's a lifetime. Some of them probably died, some of them, they were just leaving the organization, and some others, they were continuing fighting for the truth. Now we will go for the next speaker, Professor Massimo Introvine. There are several scholars and human rights organizations interested in studying such problems of the spiritual communities in the society. One of them, which is an international network of scholars who studied the new religious movements, is CESNUR. We thank you to CESNUR and to its founder and managing director, Professor Massimo Introvigne, for such commitment and interest for the truth. In his work, Professor Introvigne collaborated with the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and after that, he was appointed as chairperson of Observatory of Religious Liberty, organization created by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in order to monitor problems of religious liberty on a worldwide scale. Also, Professor Introvigne is the author of tens of books and articles in the field of sociology of religion. He is like an encyclopedia of religions, always able to include new perspectives and understandings of human beliefs. I invite Professor Introvigne to share with us his expertise in Taijimen case regarding raising goblins.
I'm sure the reference to raising goblins is already capturing the curiosity of our audience, and it's something which may seem strange and perhaps minor, but it is not unimportant in the context of the Taijimen case. You have to figure the scene on April 16, 1997, in a country such as Taiwan, which already in 1997 was internationally well known for its cutting-edge technological progress, the home of many transnational electronic companies. And the Taiwanese open their TV, and they find a famous prosecutor telling them there is a problem, that a group has been identified in Taiwan whose leader is raising goblins. Now that may be for some of us even difficult to understand. What does it mean raising goblins? Goblins are like spirits or ghosts that in Chinese, and not only in Chinese folklore, can be evoked or mobilized by magicians who put these spirits at their services for normally bad, evil, or malevolent deeds. So we have a prosecutor who, as we know, had a sort of personal vendetta against Taijimen, coming to television and saying, Dr. Hong, the founder of Taijimen, is raising goblins. And even if Dr. Hu was powerful and even popular with the media as the so-called Rambo prosecutor character, at least he had a good public relation office, goblins were a little bit too much. And the legal community and the media were starting poking fun at the prosecutor. So the following day, on April 17, he sent investigator with empty fruit boxes to several different Taijimen academies on a merry chase to find evidence of raising goblins there. They didn't find anything, but prosecutor Ho found a pitchwood sword Now, a pitchwood sword is used in Chinese folklore sometimes to ward off evil spirits and creating good luck, which has nothing to do with raising goblins, but the prosecutor seized the pitchwood sword and told the media it will be presented to the court as evidence that Dr. Hong was raising goblins. And as a matter of fact, having told the media he will give the pitchwood sword to the court, prosecutor who didn't. Moreover, the sword disappeared after Dr. Hong and his co-defendants, as we heard, were found not guilty. Their attorney say, let's give back to us the sword. It's a valuable artifact. And it was nowhere to be found. It had simply disappeared, which was a pity, because it was a commemorative work of art which had been done by a local artist and given by a lady Dizzy to Dr. Hong as a gift. And to this very day, the granddaughter of the lady who gave as a gift the pitchwood sword to Dr. Hong is still complaining, saying it was a beautiful, valuable object. And when I told the artist that the prosecutor believed it was a ritual artifact to raise goblins, the artist was totally astonished. It's for him, it was a work of art. And we should add that raising goblins or ghosts is already very rare in Taiwanese spirituality, and certainly totally outside of the Taijimen worldview. But I want to take a step further, one perhaps not taken before even by scholars who have studied the Taijimen case, because the real question is why on earth prosecutor Hu introduced the goblins in his case. It doesn't look like a very smart move. So one explanation, for example, in the study of the Taijimen case made by Professor Jacobson of Temple University in Philadelphia, who is in the United States, his idea is prosecutor Hu was just so obsessed with the Taijimen case that he didn't see he was courting ridicule with this story of the goblins. This is certainly a valuable observation, but I would suggest an alternative explanation. Scholars of new religious movements who studied China or Eastern Asia have become very much familiar with the expression Sejiao. Sejiao is translated now in mainland China, particularly in the media of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, as evil cults or cults. And this is done to elicit the sympathy of those who are against cults in the West. But it's a little bit anachronistic. Now, I have written, and other colleagues in the field of new religious movement studies have written that Sejiao appears as an expression in the Ming era. But I have to apologize, we were wrong because a Chinese professor, Miss Wu Yung King, who teaches at the University of London, recently published first a long article and then a book called Mandarins and Heretics about the story of the fight against Sejao. And she demonstrated that Sejao appears much earlier than we believed. Actually appeared in the Hague Middle Ages in the 8th century under the pen of Fuji, and Fuji was a great enemy of Buddhism. He called for the violent eradication of Buddhism in China, and he was the first to use Sejao, whose best translation is heterodox teachings, to designate Buddhism. So we are more than 1,000 years ago. And then Sejao was used to designate what was called the White Lotus. We now know White Lotus is somewhat misleading label, because there was a small group called White Lotus, but the Chinese emperors for almost 1,000 years, they used White Lotus for what today we will call a cult. The groups they didn't like, they say, oh, they are members of the White Lotus. And there is a kernel of truth in what we said about the Ming, because the Ming made the Sejao into a legal category and started publishing lists of Sejao or prohibited groups. And that has continued until this very day in China. In China, there is an office compiling and revising the lists of Sejao, but it's a very old story. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because in the book by Professor Wu, we read that a sort of a stereotype of Sejao was created in Imperial China. And Sejao had two features in this stereotype. In many cases, they were not true, but they were argued or asserted at any rate for all groups labeled as Sejao. Number one, they were against the government. They were trying to subvert the government. And number two, they practiced black magic, including raising goblins. And Professor Wu explains the second is because in Imperial China, the imperial power is the only authorized practitioner of magic, good magic by definition. It's part of the aura or charisma of the imperial power. So those who are banned as enemies of the empire, by definition, they practice black magic. In most cases, it was not true. Just one example, in the 18th century, Christianity as a whole, and particularly Roman Catholicism, was included in the list of Sejao. When the ships with guns appeared on the coast of China, of the Western power, it was taken out for political reasons. But surely nobody raises goblin in Christianity. On the contrary, Christianity is normally against magic, but it doesn't matter. If you are a bad group, you practice black magic and you raise goblins because that's part of the stereotype. So I will conclude by saying that by accusing Dr. Hong and Taijimen of raising goblins, consciously or unconsciously, prosecutor Hu was connecting himself to a 1,000-year and more old tradition of limiting religious liberty in what is called the sinosphere, the sphere speaking Chinese, and defaming or stereotyping groups believed to be against the government by accusing them, rightly or in most cases wrongly, of practicing black magic and raising goblins. So this story of raising goblins on one hand is ridiculous, but on the other hand, it places the crackdown on religious group which happened in '96 in Taiwan exactly within a story of more than 1,000 years of denying religious liberty or allowing religious and spiritual liberty only to groups actively supporting the government. Doesn't matter whether it is imperial government, communist government, democratic government, but if you don't support the government, you are a sejao, you go to jail, and you are even accused of practicing black magic and raising goblins. So the goblin story, perhaps, is on one hand more important than it seems, and of course, on the other hand, casts a doubt on all accusations raised by prosecutor Hu, including tax evasion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Introvigne. I cannot keep myself in saying that it's just a kind of continuation of the witch hunt, which was a while ago. In different ways, this kind of witch hunt, it's still here and there intervening in the spiritual communities, how they are, let's say, persecuted or accused, even though is no proof, still it is a legend or a story which is coming back repetitively and abusively used. Now we'll move further to our next speaker, Dr. Alessandro Amicarelli. He is a solicitor of the Senior Courts of England and Wales and a barrister of Italy, specialized in international and human rights law. Having earned a doctorate on international order and human rights, he has extensively lectured in human rights and taught courses and written articles on the international protection of human rights, minorities, and religious freedom, including freedom of both new religious movements and traditional minority religious and spiritual groups, and of their members. Dr. Amicarelli is the chairman and spokesman of the European Federation for Freedom of Belief, FOB. And now, Dr. Amicarelli, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Let me start by saying that, yes, we live in a very strange time. We live in a time where ungratefulness seems to be the standard and gratefulness seems to be the exception. Why am I saying this? There are a number of people that set up groups and associations of assumed victims of religious minorities, spirituality groups, people that have indeed received help and support when they needed help and support inside minority groups and minority religions. This is true also when it comes to former clients of lawyers. For instance, in America, especially, there are groups of victims of lawyers, and as a lawyer myself, I find it a little bit weird, but this kind of things happen. There are groups that are set up by victims of Roman Catholicism, not just in regards to sexual abuse, but just as victims of what people call issues they had when they were Roman Catholics. The same kind of scenario happens to people that belonged to groups that are often labeled as cults or sects in some languages. But we know that cults in English has a little bit stronger meaning. Of course, we cannot put everyone and every story in the same basket. There are cases where there are real victims. But we also know that, especially at these very strange times, the role of the media in spreading fake news when it comes to cults is very central. And very often, when this happens, when victims of religious groups tell their stories to the media give it for granted that what the victim is claiming is true. And then the cult is wrong, and then the story is circulated widely, even though very often these groups are found to be innocent in court, but at that point the media, the journalist involved in the spreading the fake news, is no more interested in telling the truth to the audience, to the readers of the papers. It was recalled that today is a very important day for Taizhimen, as today, 24 years ago, the persecution of Taizhimen started. 1996 was a very important year in my own life, as in 1996 I started university and I focused all my studies on human rights and freedom of religion. And especially in December 1996, I started buying all possible books, the very few books there were at that time about these topics. So in some way, when I started reading about Taizhimen, I kind of found the connection with the story of the persecution of Taizhimen. When it comes to associations of victims of cults, well, in Taizhimen, there is something which happened with an association of victims of Taizhimen. If we look at the story of Taizhimen, we will see that the persecution of Taizhimen was mainly and largely the work of a single man whose name was recalled earlier today, Prosecutor Wu, a magistrate. We must also recall that in Taiwan, there is a very interesting body which is in charge of monitoring the wrongdoing by public officers. It is called Control Yuan. And this Control Yuan later recommended that Mr. Hu should be punished for its illegal activities, which targeted the Taizhimen group. Mr. Hu was suspected of inciting people to set up a false association of victims of Taizhimen, a so-called self-help group, back in 1996. After he had arrested the founder of Taizhimen Qigong Academy, Dr. Hong Tao-Se, and other members of the movement, Mr. Hu appeared on TV and urged the foundation of a self-help association of victims. The victims, he stated, are advised to register as soon as possible to safeguard their rights and interests. Obviously, Mr. Hu was not appealing to any altruistic motives. As the case against Dr. Hong and his co-defendant proceeded, and the prosecutor tried to use the so-called self-help group to support his own position, the judges realized there was something strange in Mr. Hu's claims about the Victims Association, and the truthfulness of the self-help entity was argued. The judges and Dr. Hong's lawyers requested Prosecutor Hu to resubmit a verified list of members of this self-help association with each of their individual personal seals and signature affixed to the document. This list was never supplied, and Control Yuan and the courts subsequently noticed the presence of names repeated twice, names of deceased individuals, and of other individuals who said they never accepted to be part of this association, and even people who withdrew their membership after they realized that the association had fraudulent aims. Now, the people that appeared to be leaders of this self-association were existent. They were real people, but the claims that they were making were false, completely false. The president was one Tsai Chang-ping, who claimed to have been defrauded some 30 million new Taiwanese dollars by Taiji Men. He was questioned by the judge Chao Tse-jung of the Taipei District Court in July 2001. Then he admitted that his claim was false. The vice president, Ms. Tseng Pi-yun, she also ended up admitting in court in September 2001 that she had lied when she claimed damages for over 3 million new Taiwanese dollars using the names of her 2 sons and 19 other individuals in a fraudulent way. She even created false sales of unknown individuals and affixed them to documents used to file the legal case against the Taiji Men disciples. As the credibility of the bogus association collapsed, Chu Hui-jing, a woman who claimed she was a representative of the Victims Association, at the hearing held in November 2000, injured a Taiji Men Dizi who was in attendance and snatched the belongings from her and was so sentenced to 20 days in jail for assault. In June 2002, in a hearing at the Taipei District Court, the claims of Tsai Cha-lung, another member of the Victims Association, who had written poison pen letters to various authorities, falsely alleging he had been defrauded by Taiji Men, were also exposed as false. Tsai claimed to have been defrauded of hundreds of thousands of new Taiwanese dollars, but after careful questioning by the judge in court, this person admitted that he had not paid any single dollar to Taiji Men. Then, lately, the control yuan verified and concluded that the Victims Association was basically false, and that prosecutor Hu admitted that he used the so-called list of victims to prosecute the whole case without any detailed investigation of its accuracy. The prosecution did not satisfy the rule of evidence. This report of the control yuan further provided evidence that the prosecutor's investigation was weak and false. The Supreme Court Criminal Division found that the defendants of Taiji Men case not guilty, and also concluded there was no tax evasion and no violation of the tax code's provisions. Finally, Dr. Hong, founder and leader of Taiji Men, his wife, and the Taiji Men Dizi, who had been detained, received national compensation from the government for wrongful imprisonment. But still now, after a long time, the Tax Bureau Office still claims payment of tax for year 1992. As we explained previously, repeatedly, is not due as stated in all courts at all levels in Taiwan. Now, Of course, as I said, there are cases of real victims associations. There are cases where victims do exist, but not all cases are the same. And also the media, when journalists are approached by associations of victims or individual victims, they should take their statements with a grain of salt and only provide information through the media when there is evidence that the statements are true, are not fake, and not fraudulently made up to damage this or that group. I will stop it here. If there are any questions later, they will be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amicarelli. And it was very good to have also your insight about all this situation and speaking about how actually the prosecutor did the job in Taijimen case. And just to underline once more the reality, the situation which happened to Taijimen, we have now Taijimen Dizi disciples who would want to share with us their stories. First, we invite Li Yung Wang, Taiwan attorney. It is a video presentation that she prepared for us. Please, let's watch it attentively to see her point of view.
大家好，我是职业律师，也是太极门弟子。当年太极门事件发生的时候呢，因为检调单位一直放出不实的消息，导致我们很多松师姐受到工作上面长官的压力，然后被迫辞职。那也有这样子跟他的家人，然后发生决裂的。然后因为侯宽仁检察官呢有说我们是邪恶宗教团体养小鬼，甚至我们有些松师姐呢，他们的小孩在学校都被同学耻笑，根本抬不起头来。那刑事案件的3800多个等待清白的日子里呢，甚至我们知道很多松师姐因此都走了，等不到清白。刑事案件虽然在10年多说我们无罪无罪确定，可是那个媒体寥寥几篇的报道，根本比不上当年侯宽仁检察官在侦查期间400多天耸动式的头条式的报道。我们的名誉，我们的人伦亲情受侵害，到现在国家都没有给我们任何的回复跟赔偿。即使国家只有赔了受羁押的师父师母跟师兄师姐那一点点愿意赔偿，他能赔得起我们这么多受害的师兄师姐吗？1997年的时候呢，师父被押在看守所的时候呢，我曾经因为我个人案件到看守所去接见当事人。当时因为我不是师父的辩护人，如果师父的辩护人刚好来，我可能可以看得到师父。所以我一进去就很急着想找找看看能看不到。然后呢，我竟然看到了师父，在准备回看守所的房间内，我屈前跟师父微微的鞠躬敬礼，心里实际上真的想说的是：师父你好吗？您辛苦了，我们都很想你。我不敢讲，因为师父当时在羁押监禁当中，如果我跟师父的对谈，我怕会造成师父不当的困扰。我在外面呢找了看不到师父的地方坐了下来，因为我真的不敢看到师父，我心里有愧，也怕自己的情绪会太激动。等着，我看到师父被带出来，要带进去所内了。师父呢竟然主动的回头跟我点头示意。那时候我真的觉得师父对我们的关爱好像透着那个铁门传给我，传到每一位太极门师兄姐的心里，传达着师父透过律师要求我们要用忍用和守着这个家，等着师父回来。师父当时被押的时候是个寒冷的严冬，弟子有送给师父干净的棉被，可是不知道怎么样竟然换成了一个肮脏的潮湿的棉被，导致师父的皮肤发痒红肿， 抓来结果是越来越痒，全身都不舒服，甚至会因此而9天睡不了觉。师父曾经跟侯宽仁检察官申请保外就医，可是他根本置之不理，一直到开庭后到法院的时候，法官看到师父的申请交保状，还有看到师父膝盖的红肿，还当庭让着师父坐着讲话。我是一个职业律师，可是没想到在太极门案件竟然可以看到一个检察官违法滥权到这种地步。第一个呢，他是押人取供，在没有任何证据下呢，他就先押了师父、后来的师母还有兄师姐，然后甚至在侦查期间呢，还威胁利诱，想要逼迫他们做一些不实的供述。第二个呢，甚至用搜索来打压我们。有兄弟也出来帮太极门说明辩护，结果他就马上去搜索他们家，造成兄师姐都不敢讲话。第三个，不实的抹黑，他违反侦查不公开的原则，不断散发不实的消息，导致那个媒体一言堂的抹黑，然后太极门的名誉已经完全的受损。第四个，他把财产全部冻结，师父师母的财产都冻结，也不管太极门到底的运作需要的资金，也不管师父师母还有他的3个小孩他也需要的生活费，全部都予以冻结。第四个，还制造受害人，在案子办的以后的6天，他就主动在媒体叫大家去登记成立自救会，然后让别有用心呢，还有不明了的师兄师姐去登记，也用这种方式来制造受害人。第六个，用邪恶的宗教团体来抹黑我们，然后还有说我们是养小鬼，然后抹黑了太极门，让这个伤口，这个抹黑，让太极门的名誉永远无法恢复。第7个呢，封管断水断电，他呢看到我们兄师姐呢还继续守护了这个家，竟然自己发文给各县市政府，要求对我们封管。然后内政部说你这样子于法无据以后，他正着自己僭越职权，下令给台北县、台北市的公务局，直接要求对我们太极门道馆断水断电。第8个，还甚至放话说要继续再抓人，他为了打击我们，起诉了以后呢，还对媒体说他还要继续再抓200多人。他这样的一个种种违法的作为呢，监察院在2002年就对于他侯宽仁检察官认为他违反侦查不公开等等的提出一个戕害司法公正形象，提出一个大违法缺失的报告。那里面还要求法务部从严就责议处。监察院还把这个案子列在他第3届监察院人权保障工作会诊报告当中的重大人权保障案例。然后呢，可是法务部呢对于这样的一个回文呢，先是说等刑事案子判决确定再说，等到刑事判决确定，然后惩戒时效10年一过，他竟然说没有不法。那意思说针对法务部针对侯宽仁这个案子，太极门案这个案子，最后结果竟然是没有任何的惩处。这不是官官相护、包庇，难道还不是吗？而这个人现在还高升为法务部廉政署的副署长，这对于太极门弟子情何以堪啊！真的经历过太极门这个样的刑税迫害呢，我们真的很没想到，一个违法滥权的检察官可以抄家灭门、无所不用其极到这种程度。然后呢，这个侯宽仁之前还有曾经侦办过周人生案的一些违法的案件，很多官员也都官警也因此而无罪确定。然后之后呢，还是发生过马英九总统的他的案件里面，还有刑事有所谓的笔录不实的问题，这都是这个检察官的作为。在这个检察官的办案品质，叫我们如何对台湾的司法有信心呢？走过24年，都是在师父的带领之下，真的很苦。可是我们相信，在师父的带领之下，为了公义，为了正义，为了不再有下一位受害人，我们会继续的坚持下去。我们期待还我们清白公道的一天的到来。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much, the organizers, for sharing with us this video. Very impressive. And we'll continue now with a live intervention of Shelley too. a Taiwan certified public accountant. Please, Shelley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, distinguished guests, distinguished professors, and everyone. Hello, I'm Shelley too. I am a certified public accountant in Taiwan. And first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who pays attention to Taijimin's case. As having been through the past 24 years, I have no idea what else we could do just to get back the justice that belongs to Taijimin. I was 10 years old when everything happened, and now I am already a mother. I believe that Taijimin's case was purposely fabricated. The purpose was to suppress Taijimin and even worse, to destroy it completely. Just as the video before, I really can't describe how ridiculous Prosecutor Ho was. Accusing Taijimin of raising goblins, arresting innocent Taijimin people and detaining them without informing their families and related people, advocating people to form a self-help group through the public media, smearing Taijimin on media and letting the rumor run rampant, and overstepping his authority and instructing local government to cut the water and electricity of Taijimin Academy. What he did not only caught Taijimin into a 24-year and still ongoing tragedy, but also led to National Tax Bureau's depriving of Taijimin's assets by issuing endless illegal tax bill and the illegal auction of Taijimin's land. So the whole thing was like a government collective crime that has been plotted. In fact, during the past 24 years, evidence of different kinds has proven the innocence of Taijimin. First, Taijimin was confirmed not guilty of fraud, tax evasion, or violation of tax code by the Supreme Court in 2007. After 3 criminal trials. Second, the Ministry of Education, which is the competent authority of the crime school, has clearly stated 3 times that Taijimin is not a crime school. And third, the control yuan investigated and identified 8 major violations of Prosecutor Ho and 7 violations of National Tax Bureau in 2002 and 2009, respectively. Fourth, in 2009, all Taijimin defendants who were detained received national compensation from the government for wrongful imprisonment. Fifth, over 300 legislators requested Ministry of Finance and the National Tax Bureau to set aside illegal tax disposition and resolve Taijimin's case through different means and efforts. But unfortunately, Taijimin's case was not ended even when there were plenty of evidence showing its innocence. Prosecutor Ho has never received a proper punishment for his illegal and ridiculous behavior. What's worse, like mentioned in the previous video, he was promoted to the Deputy Director of Agency Against Corruption. NTB hid evidence that was in favor of Taijimin and forged a statement which misled the administrative court to rule against Taijimin. No one from NTB was punished for the illegal behavior either. And meanwhile, NTB shaped Taijimin as a group who owes a huge tax bill but refuses to pay. They try to navigate a public opinion to suppress Taijimin. And this year in September, there was an old lady got arrested just because she held a board with a statement questioning if the bureaucrat of the enforcement agency received a bonus from Taijimin's case. And again, through the media, the public, the police, and the enforcement agency smeared those who supported Taijimin as someone who created public disorder. So we can see that the persecution of Taijimin has never ended. In fact, it's still ongoing. I personally have been on street to protest, including last year and every time during the past 24 years, distributed flyers and even filed petitions to President's office, control yuan, judicial yuan, for I don't know how many times, hoping that someone could solve Taijimin's case, but ended up disappointed every time. All the bureaucrats, they know the fact that they chose not to see it. There were times that I really wanted to give up, but Shibu told us that the tax and legal reform is not merely for rectifying Taijimin's case. It's also for rescuing those who have been or those who are suffering from persecutions. And in fact, during the past 2 years, there have been more and more cases of persecution disclosed. So it's obvious that Taijimen's case is not a rare or special case. It's a live example of how the government normally treats its people. On the other side, the untransparent and unstable tax system seriously impact the development of local and foreign companies in Taiwan too. There was a case that the tax agent accused a Hong Kong company of tax evasion and imposed tax plus the penalty, which was approximately 8 times of the tax, with a total amount of 15 million euros, merely because of the calculation of tax was in a different way. But it did not impact the government tax revenue. And there was another case that the tax agent alleged the company and its satellite factories had hidden sales revenues. And as a consequence, the company was not allowed to file for tax refund of sales tax. After the news was exposed, the bank called back all the outstanding loans and the company went bankrupt, so were the 8 satellite factories, which resulted in the loss of almost 1,600 jobs. And what happened afterward? It proved to be a mistake, but all the 9 companies were gone. The investigation of the Taiwan Ministry of Education and the U.S. Department of State's investment climate statement both pointed that the unstable and inconsistent policy and regulations are the obstacles that foreign companies face in Taiwan. In the Taiwan White Paper from 2015 to 2019, as well as the position paper from 2015 to 2018, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the European Chamber of Commerce of Taiwan criticized such a situation, calling on Taiwanese government to review outdated and unreasonable tax law and make the tax reform effective to make Taiwan's tax system on par with international standard. So Taijimen has been through a series of unfair and even illegal treatment, which also partially took place in other different cases, which proves that the rectification of Taijimen's case is an indicator that if Taiwan's government is realizing its legal and tax reform as it promised. I still remember during the time when the media kept smearing Taijimen as an evil religious group, we wore our Taijimen outfit and walk on the street. We encourage ourselves to be brave, to be positive, and to bring the positive energy to everyone, trying to let everyone know that we're just kind and innocent people. Even sometimes we still receive verbal and physical attack. We sacrifice our weekend and holidays to practice and rehearse for the performance of celebrating National Day, even when a country was by all means chasing after Taijimen. And when SARS caught everyone into a panic in 2002, and the COVID-19 pandemic threatens everyone's life in the world, it was Shifu who kept reminding us of sharing the handbook of disease prevention with people in Taiwan and around the world and bringing peace to everyone's life. So Taijimen's case is something that should never have ever happened. The Supreme Court clearly stated that there was no tax evasion in violation of tax code of Taijimen. The Control Yuan investigated Taijimen's case and identified the 7 violations of NTB. And NTB admitted to the member of the Control Yuan that they did make the mistakes. But none of these saved Taijimen from being illegally taxed and the auction of its land. It's absolutely a serious violation of human rights, property rights, and the freedom of religious belief and thoughts. I was a child when Taijimen case broke out. I used to stand out to fight for myself, but now as a mother, I must stand out to protect my child and my child's future. Taijimen has devoted to promoting love and peace and bringing positive energy around the world, and that is what we need for the world and all human beings. When Taiwan's government uses tax as a means to suppress Taijimen, it implies that the government disapproves the value of culture and the contribution that love and peace has brought to the world. Likewise, when they omit Taijimen's case, it means that the government allows the violation of freedom of culture and religious belief. So by all means and effort, I truly hope that Taijimen's case could be rectified, not only for returning the justice to Taijimen, but also for keeping the same persecution from happening to other people. I truly hope that through this kind of international forum discussion, we could catch more and more attention, more international attention, and to push Taiwan's government to really look into this problem and stop the violation of human rights. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Shelley, too, for your expertise and for several clarifications that you brought in your speech. And we move further to have also the perspective, the insight from Mrs. Li Yuang Wang, which is a person who for 24 years, as also the others, had to face all this persecution that was done in Taijimen case. Please, let's see the video.
我叫王丽香，原本是一个很平凡的家庭主妇。我的先生在服兵役的时候受伤，留下了病根。只要工作劳累或者感冒，就会腰痛到动弹不得，而躺上好几天。中西医看了都没能根治。在进入太极门练气功后，先生的腰伤不再发病，觉得这里真是一个好地方。所以我们一家6口全都入门。婆婆常年的扁桃腺发炎及咳嗽也不药而愈，接着连其他亲人也陆续入门练功。幸运的是，透过师父引领，让我们全家懂得修心养性，修改自身的脾气，使整个家庭和乐融融。只要有空，我们都会到太极门道馆。在民国85年12月19日那天，大约中午过后，我一到道馆就看到自称检调单位的壮汉行动急速地穿梭在道馆中，我不知道到底怎么回事，但就是直接抽一口气，倒退了一步，心中有一个莫名感觉，我已忘了那时躲到哪儿去了。不知过了多久，只记得我是听到没有动静了才走出来。不过等我出来的时候，我先生已被带走，都没有让他知会家人。其他师兄姐跟我说，先生只穿着夹脚拖就被要求跟检警走，事出突然，当时还不懂得害怕。我们又没有做坏事，也没想过有国家暴力这件事，更没有想到检调单位检察官会害人。我想说，先生可能去就回来。一直到晚间在喂小孩吃饭，听到电视新闻声音出现太极门掌门人，回头一看，看到师父被压的画面，我心中想，这一定是误会，却不知这其实就是国家暴力的开始。后来侯宽仁检察官换话要抓更多人，我先生在86年6月份被侯宽仁传讯，他说侯检察官非常凶，只要回答他的内容，侯检察官不满意就很生气拍桌子，而且张大眼睛瞪他，像要吃了他一样。我先生又害怕又委屈又紧张，当时还有刘邦川律师在场，连刘律师都说侯检察官实在有够凶。我们夫妻忧心恐惧，从此每天都很担心，却又不敢让家中老人及小孩知道。每天就会时时看看四周有没有先生生面孔在附近，早上要开门也会开一点点，瞄看看有无生面孔的人。这样惊恐的心一直持续，不敢放松。另外，我们也怕师兄姐受牵连，在太极门练气功，修养心性。师兄师姐之间就好像是家人一样。我偷偷的把跟师兄姐联络的电话资料拿到空地烧掉，只因心中害怕会不会监视的人看到这个又乱抓师兄姐去。因为这个搜索来得很突然，带给我们莫名的恐惧。又我先生被抓去后被这样暴力讯问，这样的场景以前只在电影电视剧中才有看到，没想到竟然轮到自己的头上。之后媒体接连的不实报道，散布养小鬼的消息，这些竟然是由一位代表国家司法正义象征的检察官放出的。也因此当时的社会大众当然是相信这些报道的。有一回，包括我们家小孩在内的几个小朋友穿着练功服去大卖场，卖场中竟有一位小孩大叫：“太极门耶，他们养小鬼耶！”那个小孩的妈妈赶快把小孩带走，仿佛是看到什么怪物一般。 这对孩子是多大的伤害啊！连我的公公唯一休闲是爱到老人茶店泡茶，也被旁边的人嘲笑：你儿子有没有被抓去关啊？听说那里有养小鬼，你儿子会画符咒吗？这些歧视性的伤害，我们只能默默承受。家人都成为别人异样眼光之下的对象，自己亲身经历这样的国家暴力。我原本也相信国家公正执法代表的检察官，但在太极门事件的真相上，检察官却是滥用国家公权力的加害人。我的先生是奉公守法，所以言辞的老实人，竟蒙受这样的不白之冤。我们是在太极门练功，获得身心健康的，为什么先生只是讲实话，却在后来也变成被告？侯检察官没来由的压人、胁迫、逼供、胡乱按上罪名，对先生造成莫大的心理压力。一个人的清白莫名遭抹黑，除了花时间出庭外，更要承受亲友、客户们异样眼光及酸言酸语的刺激，这谁能忍受？案件发生后，几年下来，也对他的身体健康造成很大的影响。当案件还在审理阶段，我的先生就蒙冤走了。这些年，我的心是纠结医学的，我被迫要一肩扛起整个家庭的生计，上要照顾婆婆，下要抚养突然失去父亲的4个年幼的小孩。在我小孩成长过程中，充满没有爸爸陪伴的遗憾，而这是这个号称民主国家给他们的一个好人，一个美满的家庭。就因为1219事件受到国家暴力的摧毁，而这位侯检察官违法侦办太极门案，受到监察院纠举有8大为师，却没有受到任何惩处。现在竟还可以官位高升，这如何让人民信服？如何让人民相信台湾的政府，相信台湾的司法是有正义的？更荒谬的是，最高法院3审判决确定太极门无罪无税。无诈欺，无漏税，无违反税捐稽征法，没有任何欠税，还太极门清白。国税官员尽可说，法院判的不算，税单继续开，一局独大，凌驾司法。更可恶的是，国税局竟然与行政执行署联手，违法强行拍卖太极门土地，只为了贪渎奖金跟绩效。有关政府单位都没有人出来解决。24年了，人民走投无路，只能走上街头。当初我的小孩都还很小，24年，他们都长大成人了。结果，身为受害人家属的他们，不仅要为自己的3餐打拼，还要继续无奈地站上街头。除了要找回当初父亲被污蔑的清白，也要争取被政府漠视的人权。24年来，政党轮替3次，历经7任总统，却如出一辙。我希望我们的总统能够本着良心执政，面对过去政府所犯的错误，还给太极门一个真正的公道。
Thank you very much to Mrs. Wang for her testimony. It's very touching to see how actually families were so much affected by all these years of persecution and endless story on the case. And we'll move now to our next speaker, Mr. Tao Yuan Liu, who is a student at the Department of Chemical Engineering from the Cheng Kung University. Please, you are invited to share with us your testimony.
Hello.
Hello, we hear you.
Okay. Distinguished scholars, professors, experts, and dear friends, good day. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share with you my thoughts about this state violence, which has lasted for 24 years. My name is Tao Yuan Liu. I'm a student now with a major in polymer science at National Taiwan University. This last Monday was my birthday, my 24-year-old birthday, which I should be happily celebrating and look forward to a brighter future. But the truth is I couldn't, because December 19th is just 5 days after my birthday. The fear of state violence and the injustice against Taijimon, Shifu, and Dizi caused an unfading shadow on my heart. And here is my story. My entire family and I have joined Taijimon for years. We learn from our beloved Shifu Qigong, life wisdom, and the balance between yin and yang. Long before I was born, my grandmother had cancer. Because she suffered a lot from her illness and chemotherapy, she almost gave up fighting. Luckily, she learned to practice Qigong and think positive thoughts after becoming a Taijimon Dizi. After years of practice and treatment, my grandma finally regained her health. In order to show her gratitude to Shifu, Grandma gave Shifu a pitchfork sword as a present. Yes, that's pitchfork sword. On April 17, 1997, a vicious prosecutor accused Taijimon raising dumplings. And as Professor Marcia said, the only evidence he provided was the pitchfork sword, which gave my grandma to Shifu as a present. When my grandma heard the news, she was so furious that she decided to go on hunger strike to protest against this unjust act of the persecutor. With the whole family, including me, who was merely 1 year old at that time, the accusation of raising dumplings was so ridiculous and made all of us question the persecutor's mental state. Additionally, as Professor said, a pitchfork sword in Chinese folklore is sometimes used as dispel evil and invoke good luck. So how could it be used as an evidence of raising dumplings? I cannot imagine what would have happened if my whole family had gone on a hunger strike. But Shifu, who was detained at that time, through his lawyer, told everyone to stay calm. He wanted all Dizi, including my grandma, to respect and wait for the court decision. So we did. Fortunately, Taijimon won the criminal case after trials that lasted 10 years and 7 months. However, the tax case for the year 1992, which was derived from the criminal case, is not resolved yet. The Administrative Enforcement Agency even auctioned the land of Taijimon, despite the truth that the tax amount related to the monetary gifts for our Shifu have been corrected to zero for 1991, 1993, 1994, and 1995 and 1996. And the enforcement agency revoked the auction for 1992. They even started to auction the bonus and credit for job performance before the auction. I couldn't believe that all these despicable acts really happened in my country until I witnessed it. As I said, my major is engineering. So the most important key to all engineering cases is due process. Here is a very simple example. If we try to dilute sulfuric acid, the correct process is to let sulfuric acid slowly drop into water. Because mixing sulfuric acid and water will intensely release heat. So what if we reverse the correct process of diluting sulfuric acid? It might cause a bumping effect, which is very dangerous, especially using strong acid like sulfuric acid. In Taijimon case, there were many violations of due process of law. That's why I'm standing here today. I wish Taiwan governments to have the ability to debug problems. All the violations of due process of law should be corrected and justice must be served. And there's a movie called The Trial of Chicago 7. It's based on the true story in 1968 about the government abusing its power to arrest and accuse the leader of social movements at that time. I couldn't shake the feeling that what I saw in the movie, it's what every Taijimon Dizi and Shifu have been through right now. The whole world is watching. It's an iconic chant for the protest movement. Now I also want to say this iconic chant to my government too. The whole world is watching. It's never too late to right the wrong, but it's too late if you try to hide. When I was a college student, I follow my Shifu to attend the International Conference of Chief Justice of the World in India. I witnessed the selfless dedication of leaders from all walks of life to safeguard national human rights and improve the legal system. Of course, I hope my country will become better. Professor Xu Tiancai, a former legislator in Taiwan, said that resolving the Taiji case is the most important step in the implementation of transitional justice. He also said that a true democracy that upholds the rule of law must have a national mechanism for effective correction for mistakes. Due process requires the government to respect all the legal rights a person is entitled to. The administrative agencies must abide by the administrative procedures when doing their jobs to avoid violating people's human rights. The principle is easy to understand. However, 24 years have passed. From when I was born until now, I was 24 years old. The Taiji cases was still not resolved. Can you imagine our sadness and anger? But my Shifu said, tell us always to love our country and the world. So I am very grateful for this opportunity to speak up and hope that our efforts will make Taiwan a truly beautiful country. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Yes, indeed, having just 24 years old is like all your life. You grew up in this case, and I hardly imagine how much you wish to end it and to have a happy end, happy conclusion for all this story. We'll move further to Mr. Ming Sheng Wan, and he is the next DC from Taiji Man who will share with us his testimony.
我从年轻就是个喜欢武功气功，喜欢研究圣经、道德经，一切中国文化及古老的事物的人，都很吸引我去探讨。直到30年前，跟着我师父洪道子博士练功。拜入太极门之前，我跟过好几个师父，好几个老师啊。最后我留在太极门研修至今。我来太极门练功后，没有多久，我的太太也进到太极门练功。我的小孩、家人、亲友都来练功。现在我的孙子也进来练功了，整个家族获益良多。我太太以前身体很弱，贫血严重，我自己鼻子过敏，儿子皮肤过敏，都在太极门练功后获得改善。最重要的是，练气修心的过程中，让我的脾气也有所改变。原本大人的主义变得懂得体贴太太，甚至令家庭气氛变得更和谐，更是我以前的老烟枪的习惯也都戒掉了。太极门气功是全方位的修行，也是我至今能在太极门研修的原因。85年12月19日那一天，我的妻子刚好去会馆和师兄姐谈心话家常。下午我骑车去接她回来，不料看到冷清的会馆只剩下几个师兄姐，他们告诉我说，我太太已经被押去台北市调查处了。刚才检察官领着一群媒体，带着警察跟调查局人员，拿着枪支来会馆大肆的搜索，并且把师父跟一群师兄姐全部带走。检警调他们拿着枪押着师兄姐一行人，在市区的人行道上，近乎游行般徒步离会馆差不多500公尺远的台北市调查处询问。我听到后，一股寒气从脚底窜到了脑门，心都凉了。这到底什么事情会有这么严重啊？还要荷枪实弹的上门抓人？我一想，不对啊，我们并没有犯罪啊，我们只是练功而已啊，为什么会来抓人呢？而且是个无预警的突然抓人。 在不知如何求救无门下，我心急如焚。从下午4点多等到凌晨1点，这中间近乎10个小时的煎熬，我完全没有任何妻子的讯息，检察官也没有来通知我的家人。期间，我从媒体上看见我妻子出现在新闻画面，铺天盖地的说涉嫌欺诈，还照出他大大特写的头像。我一头雾水，我们世代家世清白，为何这种方式无预警的抓走？媒体还用这种方式大大用媒体污蔑，到底是检察官办案还是媒体办案？凭什么我们要被这样的对待？我妻子平时是一个胆子很小的人，那天突然遇到这种事情，我真是焦急，不知道他该如何是好。这样子一直等到半夜，我妻子终于悄悄的回来了。因为怕我父母亲担心，所以隐瞒了这个事情。他关上房门，抱着我，闷声大哭特哭啊！盖在棉被里，全身发抖，又怕吵醒家人，惨白的一张脸，差点没昏厥过去。可想而知，当时他遭受了多大的压力。他哭了好久好久，颤抖的声音告诉我说，他被人恐吓，他在市调处将近8个钟头，被设计的调查人员用威胁的那个样子给他疲劳轰炸审讯，没有给他一滴水，也没有给他一滴饭，还用预先设计好充满陷阱的题目，硬是要我妻子照他们的想法去回答，不然就不放他回家。这些威权恐怖的场景，活脱脱的在号称民主法治的台湾上演。政府成了破坏人权的头号凶手。由于我和妻子都是公务人员，生活很单调、很单纯，遇到这种事情的时候，打乱了家里平静的生活。接二连三听到好几位师兄姐的家也遭到搜索，其中有一位姓文的师姐，因为接受媒体的采访提到太极门的好，而遭到检调强闯搜索，造成他家人无法谅解。年纪轻轻的就丢下幼年的儿子，郁卒而终啊！随即扣押了师母、大师兄及刚生下婴儿不久的彭师姐。想到自己跟妻子也可能是下一波被清算晋升的对象，年迈的父母，还有还在读书的子女，往后的日子不知道如何是好。从那时起，我跟妻子每天都时时刻刻都过着担心受怕的日子。每次听到师兄姐被闯入搜索，并且被抓走，我晚上都要起来检查门锁好多次，就怕被人家闯入。我们是家中经济的支柱，若是被抓走要怎么办？这不是白色恐怖，这到底什么才是白色恐怖？我至今仍然十分的浅眠，一有风吹草动就会醒过来。虽然时间过去了，但是伤痕总是刻在心底，迟迟不去。若不是亲身经历，真的无法相信。如今政府强调转型正义，光就我家和师兄姐们遇到的这种伤害，我强烈要求政府要给我们道歉。我不仅承受极大来自家人不谅解的压力，承受同事同才间的歧视，还要担心出门，否则一个不小心就不见了，再也回不了家，甚至被公司政风处叫去问话。穿上连裤服走到街上，就像耶稣背着十字架在游街，一路上遭人唾弃、指指点点的谩骂。事情经过了24年，我们看到台湾政府依旧没有进步，在司法应还太极门清白，3审判决无罪，但国税局居然不依法院判决，仍然持续开出税单。来自国内外专家学者的喊话声援全球太极门弟子，街头陈情，政府连沟通机会都没给我们。国税局更联手行政执行署，为了奖金快速违法拍卖太极门的资产，留给太极门师徒永恒的伤害，更伤害台湾的民主人权。我的孙子今年上国小6年级了，他从没有满1岁就跟着家人被抱到总统府陈情。当时行政院秘书长林宗生也曾 接受太极门陈情，并且召开跨部会会议，协调决议要将净事理性质做充分的调查。调查结果7401份证据全部证明净事理就是赠与。没有想到后来国税居然隐匿证据，硬凹说净事理性质一半是赠与，一半是学会，让太极门又奔波法院多年。我的孙子从出生开始走上凯道，一次次参与陈抗活动，他都知道国税局课税要依法，要保障人权，至今他都要快国小毕业了，政府依然还未给我们公道。太极门师徒24年来付出的精神、金钱不可计数，不是为别的，就是为修行人对真理的坚持。高唱民主人权的台湾，至今还是个尚未平反太极门假案，甚至在台湾以民主斗士为政党形象的执政党上台后，还发生行政机关不理会法院的判决，强行拍卖人民土地、收归国有的恶劣行为，亦发生了执法警察为不合法扣押侦讯无辜的人民。如此荒谬的情节，在自傲以为人权立国的执政党眼中，真的是一大耻辱。真心希望政府正式面对国家的错误，还人民一个真正人权法治的社会。
Thank you very much to Mr. Guang. And we go further to Mrs. Xu Ying Chang, who is a counseling teacher in Taipei. Please, you have the floor.
Okay, professors, experts, scholars, and distinguished guests, good day. My name is Zhang Shuying, and I'm a counseling teacher in high school. There are many things in life that we will never forget. The Taijimen cases is one of these events. Even though 24 years has passed, it is engraved on my heart. I'm one of the more than 10,000 victims of Taijimen case in 1996. I was a grade 8 student back then. On the following day, one of my junior students came to worriedly saying, "You have been defrauded. Don't go to Taijimen anymore." 3 of my classmates were in Taijimen. We went to the cafeteria together with our white uniform on. Everyone was looking at us and chatting privately. When we sat at the table, people next to our table stood up and left immediately. A friend of mine came to see me. I had a drink to him. He was joking and asking, "The drink is not cursed, is it?" He didn't drink the whole time. I have the sciatica. I have sciatica at the age of 18. When I was 26, the pain was so severe that I could barely sit, stand, or lie down. I spent countless hours and money on medication. I was exhausted and hopeless. I did not see the meaning of life. We have a saying in Chinese that goes, "There is always a way out." At this worst time in my life, I joined Taijimen. Qigong helped me to heal my body and made the pain go away. I gradually pick up my stress. I became more active and proactive and willing to help others. When I changed my job from a social worker to a counseling teacher, I felt anxious. My shifu told me on 3 different occasions and with strong confidence that it is good to be your student. You know, those words have been engraved on my heart. From time to time, when I feel upset, frustrated, or want to give up, shifu's words would resonate in my heart. A wave of stress would emerge from the depths of my heart. I will feel warm and being trusted and regained my stress. This is how Kung Fu has been taught and learned in the Asian Menpai. I have been a counseling teacher for more than 10 years. In addition to my professional training, the Kung Fu I learned from Shifu has enabled me to assist my students to get through their difficulty in life. I'm grateful and I have found the meaning of my life. Shifu led the Taiji-Man Culture Goodwill Group to visit 16 nations in Africa in 2002. We were invited to take part in the National Day celebration of Gambia. A group of children came to us and asking for money. We did not turn away. We did not give them money either, but we extended our hands and held the hand of the children. They were shocked for a brief moment and started to smile with shining eyes. So every one of us was holding the hand of a child and walking to the side of the celebration. This is what we have learned from Shifu. We respect every individual equally. During the parade, the president of Gambia was standing with Shifu and introduced to Shifu all the team in the parade. The president showed a lot of respect to Shifu. However, when we come back home after a culture trip in foreign countries, we have to face the persecution from Taiwan government. The nation we love the most hurt us the most. The government does not fulfill the responsibility to take care of the citizen. Instead, the government officers abuse their power to violate people. Because we love Taiwan, so we like to see Taiwan becoming a nation with human rights, justice, democracy, and the rule of law. For 24 years, Taiji-Man refused to compromise. I was 27 when the case broke out. Now I'm 51. In the past August, I saw a 19-year-old young man standing in the front line of protesting and tell the illegal officials, "You must not illegal auction off Taiji-Man properties." The young man has been persecuted by prosecutors and tax officials since his birth. Taiji-Man Li Peichao passed away at the age 100. Before he passed away, he still insisted taking a legal tax reform sign in the street on his wheelchair. This 24-year case of injustice has affected the people in 3 generations. The use of Taiji-Man have been taken away. Justice and the rule of law have been taken away. What is even more important is the hope for a better nation has been taken away as well. We published a book, Who Steals Their Youth, about the ordeals of 24 years. What has happened cannot be unrecorded. The mistake in the history have to remembered. We insist on doing the right thing. In addition, the Taiji-Man case is not an exception. There are many similar cases of persecution by the tax office. We hope more people will get to know the truth and fight for our rights as taxpayers. The English translation of the book I mentioned earlier will be available next year. We appreciate the helping hands from the international friends that work together to solve this case and save Taiwan. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your explanation. And now we have from one of our participants to this webinar a question. And please, one of the DC of those presenting testimonies, if you want to answer, why among many spiritual groups in Taiwan, Taiji-Man was persecuted more than others? If any of you is ready to take and to answer to this one, please, maybe.
Yes, I think I can answer this question. So hi, everyone. I think during 1996, there were also other groups that were targeted. And scholars in Taiwan says the main reason was due to political reason, because there are some, different candidates they supported, or they're in favor of different religious group. Though Taijimen did not take any political stance, or it's not actually, very, it doesn't have any political stance, but still it was targeted as one of the group that the government wants to suppress. And I guess why Taijimen's case was still ongoing and never stopped until now, the main reason was because Taijimen never compromised. Most of the group, religious group, and companies during, because I'm a certified public accountant, so I've seen lots of cases, lots of companies, once they receive the tax bills, whether it's legal or illegal, they will just pay the tax bill to avoid the consecutive or the continuous problem, because business wants to make money, and religious group, they have to, continue their operations too. They would rather to focus their energy on, continuing their regular operation rather than spending time fighting with this country mechanism, which is very hard for any individual, and even for Taijimen, even for a group with lots of people. So I guess that's why the persecution to Taijimen never ends, because Taijimen never compromise, and they are, I think it's a little bit like they're messing with the wrong people. They haven't thought of that before. They thought that by issuing illegal tax bill, they can hunt down Taijimen, they can force Taijimen to close, but they never think of that. People from Taijimen, they really stick to what is correct, what is not correct. They never compromise. So that's why through the 24 years, for all Taijimen people, it's really a very hard process, and even for the future. But it's also during this process that we find the value of doing the tax and legal reform. It's not just correct the wrong case to the right. It's also helping those people we might know or we might not know, who have or who are suffering from all these persecutions from the government. Yeah, I think I hope this answered the question. If there's any other people who would like to add on, welcome. Thank you.
If anybody else wants to add something, or if not, we move further to our next speaker. We move now to Mr. Marco Respinti, who is director in charge of Bitter Winter magazine. And Mr. Respinti is an Italian professional journalist, member of the International Federation of Journalists, essayist, translator, and lecturer. He has contributed and contributes to several journals and magazines, both in print and online, both in Italy and abroad. One of his books, published in 2008, concerns human rights in China. And also he is a founding member as well as board member of the Center for European Renewal, a non-profit, not partisan, pan-European educational organization based in The Hague, Netherlands. He serves as director in charge, as I said, also for Bitter Winter and for the Journal of Chesnur, and as well as he is editor-in-chief of International Family News. Mr. Respinti, the floor is yours. And we invite you mainly to comment on the testimonies, disease stories that we just heard.
Thank you so much, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. Thank you so much for giving me the possibility to participate to this great event commemorating an abuse. I'm very proud of being here today. I hope you listen me. You can hear me well.
Yes,
because I have some problems, and so give me a sign if there is something wrong. Well, I've been asked to comment on the previous testimonies, and my first comment would be, what can I add to the staggering stories that our friends and witnesses have suffered during all these years. We just heard that one of them is as old as the persecution of Taiji men is, which is unbelievable for a Westerner like me. It's unbelievable for people living in democratic society, having one citizen of a democratic country who has lived as long as the persecution is going on. It remembers me when I was younger, and I heard people witnessing on totalitarian countries like the Eastern Europe and Central Europe countries and the Soviet Union. Chiefly, you know, they knew nothing but persecution. Their history, their memory could go back only to a time of persecution, which is unbelievable these days. We recently celebrated the Human Rights Day, and again, it's unbelievable. One thing that strikes me, which I want to briefly comment upon, having heard these great testimonies, is the strong relationship which ties Taiji men Shifu and the Dizi. This is very heartening. This is very touching also. We see that, you know, we see this strong relationship between the founder and the disciples, and the disciples retelling their own stories on how much Taiji men affected them and their lives for the good. And this is in a year like the year we're now living, and in this time is very heartening. And it brings me to, if you allow me, kind of very refined and very professional, but nonetheless anger toward you know, someone who is who thinks that he or she has the power to repress people of peace, people of affection, people of love, people of these kind of people. The other thing that struck me while I was listening to the testimony is the current word of violation of human rights, abuse, and lack of effective practical rule of law, which is again something very, very staggering these days, especially for someone like me living in the West, but especially for anyone who lives in a democratic country. We see that we have a problem here with the Taiji men case, and that problem has the name of prosecutor who has gone through all different stages of practical persecution toward these totally pacific group, spiritual group, and even going to that further as to go beyond what the courts of law stated very openly, and using a branch of the state, the tax bureau, to repress these people. But we could be misled in if focusing only on the problem of prosecutor who of course is the man behind this machinery repressing Taiji men, because we could think that that could be only the problem of one person. it is not the case as far as I understand it, because this case, this problem with this man, prosecutor Hu, goes beyond his own person at the extent that he, as we just heard, was not removed, was not in any way sanctioned for his misdeeds, and his misdeeds is not something, you know, that happened yesterday. So we have a story of these misdeeds, and if the government doesn't intervene, removing or sanctioning a man like this, who is guilty of staggering abuses, there is something more than just a person. What we're facing now is the power of the state used to repress people and groups, using taxes, so using a tool that normally in a democracy should be used to provide for some benefits for the people. So we pay taxes in order to have some services, but we are now facing, in the case of Taijimen, just the contrary. One tool for the good, which is used as people. I use this word tool because we all understand, it's pretty clear that the Taijimen case, as we say and repeat many times, but it's a very important point which I want to stress one more time. The Taijimen problem is not a money problem per se. If that was the case, the Taijimen in 24 years should have paid what the tax bureau asked them to pay, and that would have costed Taijimen less money than what the movement spent to defend itself and its members. So it's, you know, it's a money problem as a tool used for something else. And what is this something else? It's repression of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and first of all, freedom of religion, from which freedom of expression and of speech come. The whole story that Professor Introvigne just told us about raising goblins shows us clearly that excuses, ideological excuses, are used to treat religious groups as enemies. And this is what I want to finally stress. All this illegality, abuse, abuse of power goes to, it all conjure up to blame religion as such. We heard just a few seconds ago that Taijimen was not the only group persecuted by a branch of the Taiwanese state or the Taiwanese state through taxes. But what is the difference? What is the difference between Taijimen and all the other persecuted groups? They didn't compromise. They didn't surrender. They didn't compromise because they are religious groups and they're pretty convinced that what they believe in is true. So they don't want to compromise on first principles. So people who don't compromise on first principles are very eager not to surrender first, but they become automatically enemy of a state which perceives itself as kind of secular God, having the right to destroy any competitor like Taijimen. We're now facing once again a tale of two gods, a secular God, the state, using all these power and abuse of power to repress the true gods, meaning the gods are spiritual forces that groups think are true and shape their morality, their way of life, their style of life. I think this is a very grave problem this is a very strong problem. While I was trying to comment on these testimonies, very important testimonies, I just thought, I just tried to imagine someone who connected to YouTube right now, or a few seconds ago, or a few minutes ago, hearing all the testimonies, and these men, not knowing anything about Taijimen and the case we are discussing now, could think, oh, wow, they are speaking of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, in the Soviet Union, in mainland China, or even in the Third Reich. We heard, people have with state using guns, using to threaten democratic people, peaceful people. This is so bad that we could not imagine it is happening now in a democratic country like Taiwan. So finally, we have a problem here also in the democratic country. Democracy, as it has been famously said, is the worst of all the way of government except democracy itself. So we need to do something to cope with this, because we have nothing else that living in a democratic society, which is better than anything else. But we need to fix some rules. And one first rule is freedom of religion should always come first, and the state has no power to curtail that, and the power of the state should be limited. First of all, using taxes. I just want to summarize my comments by reminding an immortal quotation by Thomas Jefferson, which sums up my feeling today and is becoming my uniform, and hopefully can become the ideal that we should use in cases like this. And the quote goes like, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." We don't want to see anyone to use tyranny over the mind of man. We don't want to see the Taiwan government or branch of the Taiwanese government to use tyranny on DZ of Taijimen. Once again, for this reason, we are all DZ of Taijimen today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Respinti, for your comments on the testimonies. And now we move further to our next speaker, Mr. Peter. Our next speaker, Mr. Peter Zöchrer, journalist and blogger, Executive Director, Forum for Religious Freedom Europe. Mr. Zöchrer is a journalist who is based in Vienna, Austria. He is a member of Reporters Without Borders, an international press freedom watchdog, and also he is the co-founder and executive director of FOREF, Forum for Religious Freedom Europe. In recent years, FOREF has expanded its area of monitoring religious freedom into the countries of the former Soviet Union, into the Middle East, and even into Asia. Since 2014, Dr. Aaron Rhodes, former director of the International Helsinki Federation, has been president of the organization. FOREF addresses human rights violations regularly in the OSCE and at the United Nations. Mr. Zöchrer is also active in social media and advises minority groups in media matters, and as a reward, in December 2018, he received the Austrian Journalist Association Silver Pen Award. We invite you now to have the floor.
So first of all, I would really like to thank Dr. Introvine, Massimo, and I feel very privileged to be with such a distinguished crowd. I'm just a journalist, I'm not a legal scholar also. So please consider when I'm speaking from that angle. And I'm really, really touched by, when I read the white paper of Massimo, I was quite inspired to support this movement, because I have so many similar experiences. I'm a member of the unification movement, founded by Reverend Moon. And Massimo didn't tell me a lot what I should say. He just said I should mention this legal case we had and so on. Is that right, Massimo? Okay. So I will share with you some of our problems we had. Maybe you can find yourself also in this. But we managed victoriously to overcome this. So that was from my presentation I gave in the London School of Economics with Dr. Eileen Barker. And the problem in Europe, we have a problem in Europe, which we have very powerful churches, mainstream churches, and minority churches often suffer. Dr. Willy Fortre and Massimo and Alessandro, we know all about this, right? We have been very, very much occupied with defending religious minority groups. And that's why my title was Big Fish Eats Little Fish, or why religious minorities are still a soft target in the marketplace of worldviews. So here we have one example. We covered the persecution of the Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia. And there's a very strong cooperation between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian legal system. When I was reading the white paper, and I also watched the previous webinar you had, this came into my mind. The first, the two ways of denying human rights, Massimo wrote. First, violent persecution in totalitarian regimes, and the human rights violations, which could be, human rights violations could be easily identified there. And then the second way of human rights in democratic countries are tolerated by the attacking unpopular, by getting to attack unpopular groups. The Taiji case is not a minor case. I totally agree with that. For example, we saw in this video Dr. Hong, no, not Dr. Hong, and I'm convinced that Taiji is totally innocent of any criminal charges. The tax case is the persecution of the most evil, persistent persecution lasting until today. This is really shocking. So I heard this professor who was demonstrating, he was very emotional on the video, and very powerfully demanded his human rights and his freedom. That's the way to go. We need to speak up. We need to speak truth to power. I was very moved by members' testimonies about your theology. I'm not sure if you can call it theology, but your principles: strengthening your body, cultivating your heart, spreading love and peace throughout the world. There are many similarities actually with the Unification Church. Unification Church in the USA, in Europe and Japan, have been very much persecuted also. Let me just share this from Mark Twain. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. So religious minorities are very small groups, right? And they are overwhelmed by the power of governments. So also freedom is not, anyway, Benjamin Franklin's famous quote, not something to be bestowed by other men, but it's the right that belongs to us by the law of God and nature. The famous quote for supporting natural rights. It is our right. So the Unification Church in the United States in 1972, President Nixon, you know, the Watergate affair, he then was outed, or he retreated, but actually Reverend Moon intervened. Reverend Moon went in the beginning of the 70s to the United States, and he really wanted Nixon to stay, and he wanted the nation to forgive, love, and unite, because America was in a critical phase. And as you can imagine, this was a very controversial thing to do. The liberal media couldn't forgive Reverend Moon for that. So there were many media and legal challenges. And then they brought a tax case against Reverend Moon. And then he had to face a jail sentence in Dunbury prison for originally for 2 years, but he was released after 13 months. And on the 20th of July, 48, he went to prison, and until September, 20th of September 1985, there was a broad coalition representing over 120 million US citizens, which jumped in, which demanded justice for Reverend Moon and for religious freedom. But anyway, at that time, something important has started. The International Coalition for Religious Freedom, which later on came onto the scene in different occasions. And I just want to share this with you. Just a moment, let me just, here, this is what Reverend Moon wrote to all the religious leaders. He wrote this personal card to them, and he expressed his gratitude that he could serve in Dunbury prison to protect religious freedom. And he had this incredible positive attitude, which was, of course, later on, we many times witnessed this attitude. And later, we had another situation in Europe. That was in the Unification Church in Britain, Great Britain. 1978, Reverend Moon started a home church project, and he mobilized many members to the United Kingdom. And then 1980, there was a media onslaught against our movement, because somehow many from the establishment found this too threatening. And of course, also parents complained, which was similar to your case. In many of your cases, parents complained, and so families were taken, ripped apart and so on. And that was a similar situation in the UK. And then they went to the media, and the Daily Mail made this their cause. And the Daily Mail is a boulevard newspaper, quite well established in the UK. And they made a 2 years campaign against the Unification Church. Reverend Moon had to go back to the United States, and but so one of the national leader sued the Daily Mail, and the Daily Mail responded in their way with a 2-year campaign against the Unification Church. So then the government felt kind of confident to take away the charity status of the Unification Church in the UK. And then our movement, we started to fight. There was finally, after a few years, all the media narratives got busted in the courts. And after 3 years, in 1985, the government has lost the charity case against us and had to return over £2 million to the Unification Church. So that was a victory. However, it didn't take long. In 1995, in Germany, I think Germany and France launched this, they issued the anti-cult movement in Europe, which Massimo knows very well, and especially Willy Fortre. He wrote a whole book about this. They launched, the anti-cult movement launched a attack against the founders of our movement by putting them on the Schengen list, which is a system, actually a security system in the Schengen countries, which puts criminals and undesired people on a blacklist, and they cannot enter the country anymore. They are banned. And Reverend Moon, who was actually coming to Europe to speak about family values, he got banned from 1995, and it took us 12 years to fight this court battle. That means the founders could not visit or give public speeches in Europe. In the Schengen countries, the members were treated as outcasts by government and media. And in 2007, finally, the German Supreme Court declared the ban as a gross violation of religious freedom against Reverend and Mrs. Moon and the members of the Unification Church. Here you can see, I was just during that time, I was a leader in the Hungarian movement, Unification movement, and I experienced it, that Reverend Moon and Mrs. Moon, they were going on a speech tour. They spoke in Hungary publicly, and it was a very successful event. And then they wanted to go to Spain. However, in the afternoon, I got the phone call that Reverend Mrs. Moon, the founders, are coming back to Hungary because they got held up in the Charles de Gaulle airport. They got treated like criminals there and interrogated, and they were not allowed to enter Spain or any of the Schengen countries. So at this point, then he came back to Hungary, and here you can see he's putting the mic up to my nose, almost up to my nose. And I think that was a sign, you know, you should defend religious freedom. That's what I understood. And that's what I did afterwards. In fact, I had a very interesting experience, which is, I don't have the time to share this. I would like to share it maybe in some other time. And so Unification Church in Japan had also heavy problems. From the 60s to 2014, over 4,300 members got kidnapped. We had really bad media in Japan, no justice. Courts simply didn't take up these cases. It was a family matter. That's a cultural thing. Willy Fortre helped us very much in this. Thank you very much, Willy. And some others in the human rights arena. And Willy Fortre even wrote an expert view on this book with how many pages? 120 pages or something like this, Willy? Something like this, yeah. And so what happened was finally 2012, 2011, or 2010 already, we were called upon to support the legal battles in Japan. But it was an uphill struggle. It was really an uphill struggle. It was one very famous case, Mr. Toru Goto. He was over 12 years in confinement. And he somehow could escape finally. that is Torquato after 12.5 years of confinement. You can imagine, you know. And he then was leading a significant court case against the kidnappers. And he established the Kidnapping Victims Association in Japan. And we supported his cause. After the victory in High Court, the kidnapping completely stopped. So that is how it looks, how it looks now. He's a happy father, and has a wonderful family. So I know my time is up. I'm sorry to drag on. But what I want to suggest as a journalist, as already Marco also did, my good friend, I really want to suggest to exploit all the possibilities of social media, and really, you know, you have, I don't know exactly how many members you have. I just got to know you actually. But what I saw, I was so moved and I was so impressed. But we need to fight this battle together, you know. We need to get this out into the world. We need to shame Taiwan for this, you know, and even if we have to go to the United Nations, we have experience with this. United Nations, OSCE, other organizations, and we fully need to exploit the social media outlets for this battle. And because the mainstream media, you cannot rely on the mainstream media right now. Although I am working with mainstream media, but you cannot rely on them. They are the mainstream media, especially in the United States, but also in Europe, they are on a kamikaze mission. They are going right down the drain. They lost their integrity, they lost their credibility, and I don't think they can recover from this. So there will be new media, and they will in future have to say, and they will transport real information to real people. So please, you know, join us on Facebook. Join us on. We have a Facebook group with over 2,500 people, participants, and we have this website, and we will publish your report as soon as we have the video. We'll publish it on the website. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy if you have any questions, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for your information. And we go now with the conclusions to Mr. Willy Fautré, Director and co-founder of Human Rights Without Frontiers. Willy was an active advocate for human rights in communist countries during the Cold War. He has extensive experience in freedom of religion or belief around the world. He is a member of the International Consortium on Law and Religious Studies. He has written many articles in university journals, held lectures in academic conferences, testified before interstate organizations, and given interviews to international media. Since Human Rights Without Frontier was created, the executive director has been Willy Fautré, a long-standing human rights activist. Human Rights Without Frontier International conducts research, field missions, analysis and monitoring of a wide range of human rights concerns around the world. An international network of correspondents provides this NGO with first-hand information, and we are sure that also now Willy will bring us important insights and conclusion on this webinar. Please, Willy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Camelia, for this kind introduction. remembering and commemorating a traumatic event which made history is important for any social group, whether it is a nation, an ethnic group, or a religious or spiritual community. It is important for the generation who experience such an event, but it is also important for the next generation because it forges the transgenerational collective identity of the group while strengthening this identity at the individual level. The 19 December 96 pogrom is such a traumatic event. It was the starting point of a series of physical persecution targeting Dr. Hong and a number of disease who were arbitrarily arrested, deprived of their freedom and freedom of movement, and imprisoned for days, weeks, or months. They were all innocent, and they were all acquitted of the spurious charges they were accused of. But at that time, there were other victims, those who were illegally arrested and their loved ones lost their jobs. Their children were mocked at school. The psychological and social damage was incommensurable. Moreover, the slanders and defamation in the media targeting Taiji Man and Dr. Hong deeply saddened all the disease. You heard their testimonies and felt their grief in their psyche and in their flesh. But persecution does not always show a face of brutality. It can be insidious, like a poison, as Peter Zurrer just explained you with the case of the Church of Unification. But its purpose always remains the same everywhere. It is to destroy and to kill. One of those poisons used by the persecutors of Taiji Men in Taiwan is the never-ending harassment by the tax administration, 24 years, for the purpose of stifling it financially to death. This form of persecution is not spectacular and can remain invisible to outsiders who might be in a position to help. But like any poison, its purpose is to remain invisible, to scare away anybody who might decide to help its victim and to avoid the threat of an antidote. That antidote being defenders from outside, as all the panelists are here today. For 24 years, the body of Taiji Man has only relied on itself and has mobilized all its cells to fight against that poison, the tax administration. Taiji Man has been largely successful in its resistance and its fight against the tax administration. But with the auction of some of its properties, it has temporarily lost a part of its integrity and its capacity. The war waged by those who wanted the death of Taiji Man was comprised of several weapons usually used by anti-cult movements. First, to fabricate a case. Second, to find alleged victims of Taiji Man. And third, to spread fake news in the media. Let's start with the first point, fabricated case. A common technique used by anti-cult organizations is to accuse a group of its leader of violating the law. Sexual abuse, exploitation of members, abuse of weakness, money laundering, criminal activities are attractive issues for the judiciary and the media. It usually takes years, if not 1 or 2 decades, and a lot of money for court expenses to be cleared of such fake charges. This can easily exhaust the mental and financial forces of a small and vulnerable group. In the case of Taijimen, the fabricated accusation was tax fraud. Marco Ferraresi explained how a taxation system can be an instrument of persecution against a specific target and be particularly effective to this end. Tax fraud was the ideal accusation to damage Taijimen, which claims to abide by strict ethical rules in this regard. But for Prosecutor Ho, this was not enough. He stubbornly looked for a possible loophole in the previous judicial cases that he had lost to fabricate a new one. The second point, the second weapon used was fake victims. There is always a natural feeling of sympathy towards victims in general. And anti-cult organizations are used to manipulating this argument in the media, whether it's true or false. As Alessandra Meacarelli from the European Federations for Freedom of Belief said, the persecution of Taijimen was largely masterminded by a single magistrate, Prosecutor Hu, who based his accusations against Taijimen in court on the testimonies of alleged victims of Taijimen. But, as he pointed out, it was a state institution, the Control Yuan, which found out during a hearing that the Victims Association was fundamentally false after the so-called victims themselves retracted during a hearing. And the last point is the manipulation of fake news. Again, anti-cult organizations know that shocking news easily make their way to the headlines in the media. Prosecutor Hu used the well-known fake news technique with Taijimen to destroy its image, as Massimo Introvigni from Cesnur described in his presentation. Prosecutor Hu accused Hong in the media of raising goblins, which in Chinese folklore and movies means evoking a spirit who would then serve to perform evil deeds. Massimo Introvigni deconstructed this ridiculous accusation, stressing that raising goblins is something totally foreign to Taijimen's practices. And I come to the conclusion. First, Taijimen needs to be praised for having remained strong and united, for not wanting a friendly settlement as it would have meant to recognize an infringement of the tax law and to declare that something was made contrary to the founding principles of their movement, which ultimately would have given the victory to the prosecutors. Persecution by a tax administration is not easy to sell, if I can use that word, to institutions and NGOs defending human rights, because there is no visible physical violence and no blood to show. But we at Human Rights Without Frontiers are familiar with that sort of persecution against religious groups in Russia, France, and other countries. The persecution masterminded by Prosecutor Hu has caused a lot of damage, morally and financially. Taijimen has survived, but what mainly matters now is its image, which has been disfigured during 24 years. One way for Taijimen of restoring its honor and its image in Taiwan is to have its past, current, and future achievements assessed by neutral third parties outside Taiwan, like scholars, lawyers, and human rights organizations. Written publications, but also video testimonies like we saw today, can greatly contribute to it. Last but not least, media outlets and actors in Taiwan are also a primary target because they shape the perceptions of public opinion, politicians, and state institutions. Mapping the negative and fake news about Taijimen in Taiwan is therefore a priority, but only a first step. The second step should be a constructive report based on research and analysis of the news distorting the Taijimen realities, reestablishing the real facts versus the myths. And the last step should be the publication of this report in English and in Chinese, to be followed by a targeted communication campaign meant to reaffirm the truth about Taijimen. My last words will be words of thanks for Camelia Marin, Marco Respinti contribution to this webinar, but also to the disease who testified, courageously testified about what they had experienced during 24 years of persecution of Taijimen, and also all those who invisibly behind the scenes contributed to the preparation and this webinar today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Fautre, for your very good concluding of the situation in the Taijimen case. And now, if there are short questions where it will be offered short answers, you are invited to put the questions. We are a little over time, that's why I'm expressing the kind request to be short questions and short answers. If anybody raise the hand and open the microphone. I think that the entire webinar was quite clear and all the points were very well expressed by each speaker, and the testimonies also, they were really impressive. And yeah, somehow the things were already into their place. If anybody wants to conclude, or else I'll just bring my conclusion for the webinar. According with human rights treaties, freedom has been defined as being the possibility of doing everything that does not harm others. Thus, the right of very man does not have limits, excepting those limits which secure the same rights to the other members of society. These limits can only be determined by law. In Taijimen case, we see that actually the law says it's no conviction, is no problem, and still the things are not applied. Considering these aspects, it is anachronistic to return to the restrictions of a society in which to say that the exercising of some rights is damnable in order just to frame some persons. We wish to Taijimen Dizzy and to the leader to have all the courage and faith and to stand for their perspective further, and of course to not admit compromises, because if your case will stand, many other cases will just start to grow around and to go for the truth, which is important for all of us in order to grow the spirituality in the world. Thank you very much to all speakers and to all testimonies, to all Dizzy who were with us today, and those who created all the videos and who are behind all this organizing event. And let's meet for another stage in which let's celebrate the ending of your case in good faith. Thank you very much to all of you.